Hello and welcome to Module 10, Imposition and Bookbinding. So this screen lecture here is a continuation of the bindery processes and what is going on in binding, bookbinding, but also discusses imposition. Imposition is a process that happens in the pre-press department, and as the word describes, imposition, it is essentially taking your artwork and putting it into position on the press sheet for printing. So it is ultimately what makes the printing plate. In the pre-press department, there are employees that take your artwork and well, first they'll take your artwork and they'll pre-flight it, and we've talked about this in the pre-flighting lecture. They'll do the file preparation and the pre-flight on it, and then after all those corrections are made and everything's good, then they'll do the imposition. And the imposition is in pre-press, to where they will lay out your pages onto the correct size for the press sheet. And there's other stuff that needs to go on to the press sheet too. There's stuff for the printer. There's printer's marks, crop marks. There's color bars where the press operator measures the color coming on the press. There's the job number and other information that goes around the press sheet that the pre-press employee needs to arrange all of that. And then that creates one big final sheet or page that gets output as the printing plate. So if you've ever taken a business card and put a bunch of them onto a letter size piece of paper, you've done imposition. If you've ever tried to make a folding card and wanted it printed on one sheet of paper and you had to flip this upside down, kind of like the diagram we see to the right here, this is called doing imposition. So I'm guessing you've probably done some sort of imposition. But we're going to look at it a little bit deeper here in the next few minutes. Some key things to know with imposition, and the reason why it's done is because paper is the most expensive material in the printing process. It's more than the ink, more than the plates, more than, well, besides the actual equipment themselves, the presses, paper is the most expensive consumable material. So it's important to use the paper wisely, to use every little bit of it as you can. And the second point is that the time on the press is the most expensive labor, is the most expensive machinery being used in printing. So if you can minimize the number of sheets that you're using, number of sheets of paper, and minimize the amount of time it's on a printing press, then your whole print job will come down cheaper. If you look over to the right here, if you take a one business card and wanted to print 5,000 business cards and it was imposed like this, you would have a waste of paper, and you would have to run 5,000 sheets through the press, which would take longer. Where if you ganged up your business cards like this, then you would utilize more of the paper and run fewer sheets, and so your costs would come way down. So imposition helps maximize the use of paper by repeating artwork and filling up the sheet, and it minimizes the time on press. There's three basic imposition techniques that you should know about, and one we just kind of mentioned and was just shown on the previous slide, and that's called gang up. That's where you put multiple copies on one sheet, like the business cards. So that's called ganging them up. I'll just head back one slide. That's down to the lower right, that's a ganged up imposition there. And that's where you have just the same thing printing over and over, like business cards, postcards, rack cards, small posters, things like that. The second one is called work and turn, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, you make one set of plates, and when you print it, you can just flip the paper over and run it through again, and it saves time on, you don't have to do another make ready on the press or or make new plates. And the third is sheet-wise, where both sides of the sheet are different, less commonly called first form, inner form. But sheet-wise is basically any way that you would do a book, where every page is different and no page is the same. So you just need to, you make extra plates and you got to run it through, and that's just how it's done. So a work and turn is really a time saver just for specific types of jobs, like a single sheet, two-sided flyer or poster or brochure. And when you, if you look at this diagram to the right, when you print one side and then you can just flip the paper over and print it again, you would have the result of the same, and so of the same artwork being printed the same way, and you don't have to make new plates or change the press around. So I will show a demonstration of the work and turn in class when we're doing our in-class session, and I'll show all three of these impositions, but the work and turn more specifically. So the reason why a work and turn is really helpful is it's represented by this shortest bar here, and the reason why is because there's only one make ready. So a make ready is when the press is putting on the new plates and it gets the color all even and up to its full density, richness of color, and it's the time it takes for the press to get everything set up, the plates on it, the inks all brought up to color and registered, aligned up correctly, and then they can start the printing. So every time you do a make ready, it takes time to switch plates and get the inks up to color, and you might have to clean other parts of the press so there's not hickeys and spots and stuff on the print. So a work and turn just it only needs one make ready, represented by the red bar, and then that blue bar is just the turn, where you can flip the paper over, run it through, and it prints the same thing on the other side. But when it comes out, you come out with all of the pieces are the same. This is just showing imposition on smaller sheets. So if you were trying to print an 8-page booklet made with 11 by 17 sheets, you would get 1, 2, 3, 4 pages per sheet. And so you'd need 2 sheets to make 8 pages. And you would take your 2 sheets, fold them, and insert them together to get your 8. If you were to go up to a 19 by 25 press sheet, then you could print 4 sheets on one side, flip it over 4 sheets on the other, and then you can just flip, flip, fold, fold, and you've got your 8 sheets. So imposition will be different depending on the sheet size and the number of pages and the size of your booklet. InDesign does have a simple imposition software built into it called Print Booklet. If you go under the File menu below Print, you'll see Print Booklet, and it allows us to do imposition with our InDesign files. And this will be a tutorial on an in-class session. So when you take a sheet of paper, I'm just going to back up here, sorry. When you take a sheet of paper that has pages printed on it, and it's intended to fold up like this, that is called a signature. So this is a signature of a 19 by 25 press sheet, and these are 2 signatures. So each sheet is called a signature. These are 2 signatures of a 11 by 17 press sheet. So a signature is a name of a sheet of paper that has pages printed on it that when folded up will form the pages of a book. So signatures are stacked for binding in different ways. This one here, the signatures are inserted into one another, and that would be for doing a type of saddle stitch book like this. And you can see that if you were to insert the pages, how you would have to go through the page numbering and get, you know, page 4 is on this sheet here, or no, page 5 is on this sheet here, and page 9 is on this sheet here, and so on. That imposition would have to be well thought out to get that put together correctly. This is where they've taken the signatures and they stack them on top of each other. So instead of being inserted, they're stacked. And this is generally how it's done for paperback books and hardcover books. When you're working with saddle stitch, where you are inserting them, there's a phenomenon called creep, where the inside pages of the booklet or book get pushed out farther because of the thickness of the paper. And you can see in this diagram where the inside pages are being pushed out. And so when it gets trimmed and cut at the final stage, those inside pages are going to lose some information if they're on the edges. So when your pages are going through imposition with a saddle stitch book, they apply a creep amount to it. And the creep is set by the thickness of the paper and how many sheets of that paper you're going to have. That's usually done in pre-press, and you don't have to worry about it unless you are printing and doing your own saddle stitch books. So like if you're doing your own imposition out of InDesign and you're going to print your own little saddle stitch books, then you might want to look into what creep is and apply it to your imposition, which is shown in InDesign in the print booklet function. They have a creep setting there. So here is another signature. This is a signature for a 16-page signature, which goes on the 38-inch or 40-inch press sheet, and they can fit 8 pages on one side, 8 pages on the other, and then fold it just the right way so that when it gets trimmed, it will have 16 pages in it. So here it shows the folded signature and then how it gets trimmed. It might create a little bit of creep, but generally on these signatures it's not a factor. And the 3 knife trim there. Here's another illustration of nested signatures compared to gathered or stacked signatures. So in this course, I'd like you to know 4 specific bindings and the pros and cons of each, the benefits, basically their relative expense and when you would want to use them. So the first is saddle stitch, and that's one of the cheapest, most common, fastest binding methods. It's where the folded pages are inserted and stitched or stapled. They say stitched because the staples are on these spools of wire that get cut, so it's kind of like a thread being cut into a staple. But they are metal and they're staples. So like thin magazines, anywhere where you've seen it folded and stapled is called saddle stitch. The second is coil binding. So that's where they stack the signatures and then they punch holes in the on the binding side and they put the wire plastic coils through them. Third is a perfect binding. Perfect binding is basically your paperback. So it's the soft cover with the square back onto it, and it is it's a very strong binding. It's not too expensive. It's a little more expensive than saddle stitch and coil, but it's strong, and you can have a lot of pages in it. Saddle stitch is limited by the number of pages. You get too many pages in there, it gets too thick, you can't staple it or fold it. So you're kind of limited with saddle stitch. Coil, you can have unlimited number of pages in. I mean, basically unlimited. Same with the perfect binding. You can have unlimited number of pages. and the signatures are stacked on top of each other, and then they're ground off and glued to a soft cover stock. The fourth is case binding, which is a hardcover book. So something like a dictionary, art, coffee table books, art books, yearbooks, things like that. You've got the most expensive binding here. It takes the longest to do. It takes at least a couple of weeks to do the case binding, because they need to. The signatures are stacked and then they're sewn with thread, and then there's various amounts of glue and reinforcement strips put onto it. And then the hardcover is made separately, and then the hardcover is made and decorated on its own, and then it has to be assembled to the book block, the pages that have been sewn together. But the result is a very durable, long-lasting binding that looks great, that is classy, and it's worth it for the right product. So here's just a diagram showing the four that I would like you to become really familiar with. And here's the perfect binding. They're ground off and glued. The case binding, they're sewn together, and then the hardcover book is put onto it. Here's the saddle stitch folded and stapled, and the coil punched and wired. So I will bring examples of all these into the class and be able to show these to you, and you can get your hands on them, and you can ask me some questions in class or through the virtual office. Thank you.